There were stars who once captivated all of Hollywood, yet the final chapters of their lives unfolded in the most unexpected places: a movie set, a quiet road, an airplane cabin, or a familiar room. Behind the iconic names lay a series of true trials, truths once shrouded by rumors, and moments that forced the entire film industry to reflect upon itself. Today's video will take you back to those very stories. Before we begin, let us know how many stories do you think classic Hollywood is still hiding that today's audiences have never heard? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to explore each story. Coming up right now. Victor Killian was not the type of star who always stood in the spotlight. He belonged to the class of actors Hollywood relied on to make an entire world on screen feel believable: sheriffs, laborers, fathers, villains, or characters who appeared for only a few minutes but left a lasting impression on viewers.
Sparks, I forgot to tell Liz. Have the mail put in number 7. Calling lookout. Calling lookout.
Born in 1891, Killian segued from vaudeville and Broadway to film, building a career that spanned several decades with movies like Only Angels Have Wings and The Oxbow Incident. After a period affected by the Hollywood blacklist, he returned to television and became known to a new generation of viewers through Mary Hartman, Mary Hartman. But Killian's final chapter was not an accident, as it is sometimes retold. In March 1979, at the age of 88, he was found in his Hollywood apartment following an assault. Police reported signs of ransacking in the apartment and treated burglary as a line of investigation. The case was never conclusively solved, and contemporary news sources confirmed it was a foul play homicide, not a fall at home. What makes Victor Killian memorable, therefore, is not the sensationalizing of his final hours. He practiced his craft from the early 20th century stage to late 1970s television, weathering Hollywood's major transformations and continuing to act into advanced age. That career demonstrates that sometimes the people who help shape film history are not always the largest names on the movie poster. In 1920, cinema had no CGI, nor could dangerous aerial stunts be created with computers. If audiences saw someone walk out onto a plane's wing mid-air, chances were they were actually doing it. Ormer Locklear became one of the most prominent figures of that era. Having learned to fly during his military service, he entered the world of barnstorming, performing, wing walking, and mid-air transfers between planes while in flight. Hollywood quickly recognized the appeal of these performances and put him on screen in The Great Air Robbery and then The Skywayman. On August 2, 1920, Locklear and pilot Milton Skeets Elliott performed a night flying scene for The Skywayman. The sequence called for the plane to dive low before regaining altitude, but that take did not end as planned. The Curtiss Jenny failed to pull out of the dive in time and crashed into the ground, killing both aviators. Subsequent accounts often mention studio flare lights as a factor that may have impaired visibility, but specific causes should be presented with caution rather than taken as definitive conclusions. Locklear's story captures a very different era of filmmaking, when the line between performance and real danger was razor thin. The spectacular images that audiences today take for granted as entertainment once depended directly on the skill and real physical risk of the people in front of the camera. His legacy is thus an integral part of the history of set safety development. A 1935 movie set accident seemed capable of ending Charles Bickford's career. Instead of an abrupt finish, however, it opened up an entirely new phase in his professional life. While filming east of Java, Bickford took part in a scene involving a live lion. During shooting, the animal suddenly attacked him. Press reports from the time noted that Bickford suffered severe injuries and had to temporarily step away from work to recover. This was a time when live animals were brought directly onto sets, while risk mitigation methods were vastly different from modern production standards. The injuries left clear scars, but Bickford did not leave Hollywood. He gradually transitioned away from traditional leading man roles to become one of the most respected character actors of his generation. The results that followed were even more impressive. He earned 3 Academy Award nominations for Best Supporting Actor for The Song of Bernadette, The Farmer's Daughter, and Johnny Belinda. Bickford passed away in 1967 due to health causes, not as a direct result of the 1935 incident. Thus, what stands out about this story is not a tragic end, but the ability to rebuild a career after one's appearance and professional path were unexpectedly altered. The accident impacted his trajectory, but it did not define the limits of his talent. The greatest accolades of Bickford's career all came after a time when many might have thought his best days were behind him. Clark Gable was once crowned the King of Hollywood, but one of the most remarkable chapters of his life took place far from any film set. When the United States entered World War II, Gable was already one of the biggest stars in America. Although past the standard draft age, he joined the U.S. Army Air Forces in August 1942, completing officer training and gunnery school. His assignment in Britain was to produce a film about aerial gunners, but Gable also flew combat missions aboard B-17s over Europe to capture real footage. These were no soundstage war scenes. Those flights placed him in real military combat environments, where Hollywood fame offered no special protection. Gable returned to the United States in 1943 and was discharged from active duty with the rank of Major in June 1944. After the war, he continued to be one of American cinema's foremost leading men. However, one must clearly separate Gable's brushes with danger from his cause of death. He did not die from a movie set accident or a wartime incident. After completing The Misfits, Gable suffered a heart attack on November 6, 1960, and was hospitalized. 10 days later, on November 16, he passed away at age 59 following another cardiovascular event. Clark Gable's story is compelling without needing to alter facts. A cinematic icon who voluntarily stepped away from the safety of Hollywood to serve in combat has enough depth to be told exactly as it happened. Ross Alexander entered Hollywood just as his career seemed to be accelerating. After years on stage, the actor born in 1907 signed with Warner Brothers and quickly drew attention thanks to his dashing looks and natural acting style. Supporting roles in Flirtation Walk, Shipmates Forever, and Captain Blood brought further opportunities before 1936's Boulder Dam gave Alexander his first top-billed role. Turner Classic Movies notes that he appeared in only 17 films over about 5 years, but at the time Warner Brothers was promoting him as one of the studio's fastest-rising young faces. Yet behind that professional ascent lay a deeply turbulent personal life. In 1936, Alexander's first wife died by suicide. He subsequently married actress Ann Nagel and kept working, having just finished Ready, Willing, and Able when his life came to a sudden close. On January 2, 1937, Ross Alexander died at age 29. Biographical sources and TCM confirm this was a case of suicide, not an accident, as some later accounts might lead viewers to believe. Alexander, therefore, is not suited to be described as a star lost in a freak accident. The more compelling story lies in the contrast between an image of a young actor on the cusp of stardom and the personal struggles that the public at the time rarely saw. His surviving films show a career that was just getting its breakthrough opportunity, but never had enough time to reach where Hollywood had envisioned. Before becoming a screen name, Marie McDonald garnered attention through beauty pageants and modeling. Nicknamed The Body, she became one of Hollywood's prominent promotional figures in the 1940s, appearing in film, theater, and music. But McDonald always wanted to be seen as more than just a glamorous image. Over her career, she worked across major studios and appeared in productions such as Living in a Big Way, where she co-starred with Gene Kelly. Her off-screen life, however, frequently became tabloid fodder, often pushing her artistic work into the background. On October 21, 1965, she was found unresponsive at her home in Hidden Hills, California, at just 42 years old. Initial reports left the cause of death unclear and led to widespread speculation. However, a later coroner's investigation determined she died from an accidental drug overdose involving a combination of medications. By December of that year, the case was officially ruled an accidental overdose rather than an intentional act. What makes Marie McDonald's story worth telling is not exaggerating her final hours. It highlights an important principle when looking back at Hollywood history. Early press reports are not always final conclusions. When recounting a real life, especially a sensitive event, official findings should be prioritized over rumors or stories repeated over decades. Just weeks before his death, Spencer Tracy was still in front of the camera, completing one of the most significant final films of his career, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, a project that once again paired him with Katharine Hepburn. By the time the film was wrapped, Tracy had spent nearly 4 decades on screen and was regarded as one of Hollywood's most revered actors. He had won 2 consecutive Best Actor Academy Awards for Captains Courageous and Boys Town, an exceptionally rare feat at the time.
Monsignor, no, I'm going to be later, so will I be seeing you later, Doctor?
You certainly will. Dr. Prentice will be here for dinner, Matt.
Oh, fine. Then you can tell me.
Tracy's final years were far from easy physically. In 1963, he suffered severe health issues related to pulmonary edema, and in 1965 experienced another critical health struggle following surgery. Nevertheless, he was determined to return to work for Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. According to the Los Angeles Times, Tracy finished his final film only about 3 weeks before he passed away. On June 10, 1967, Spencer Tracy died in California at age 67 from a heart attack. This was not a film set accident, nor was it the result of an unexpected production mishap. It is precisely the short window between his final film and his passing that makes the closing chapter of Tracy's career so poignant. Rather than focusing on a non-existent accident, the far more powerful narrative lies in an actor working almost to his final days and still leaving behind a performance that audiences continue to celebrate decades later. If this story makes you want to revisit one of his films, leave the title in the comments below. And if you'd like to keep discovering the faces that defined Hollywood's golden age, along with the lesser-known stories behind the spotlight, like this video, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. The next legend might be a name you know well, but their story may be one you've never heard. On the afternoon of September 30th, 1955, James Dean did not leave Hollywood for a film premiere. He was heading to Salinas, California, where a sports car race awaited him. Alongside an acting career that was just exploding, Dean had found another passion in high-performance cars. That day, his ride was a newly purchased Porsche 550 Spyder, a small, lightweight car built almost exclusively for speed. What made the story so poignant was that at the time, the public had not even seen the full scope of Dean's talent. East of Eden had been released, but Rebel Without a Cause and Giant lay ahead. He was only 24, with a film career that was just unfolding, yet already enough for Hollywood to recognize a different kind of leading man, less polished, more vulnerable, and closely attuned to the emotions of a changing youth generation. Near Cholumi, California, Dean's Porsche and an oncoming Ford met at an intersection. The collision occurred late in the afternoon. Dean did not survive, while his passenger, mechanic Rolf Vuderich, survived with severe injuries. In the aftermath, all kinds of urban legends grew around the Porsche, but James Dean's story needs no folklore to remain unforgettable. Just weeks later, Rebel Without a Cause premiered. Giant followed the next year. An actor with only 3 major film roles became an enduring cultural icon, far outlasting his time in Hollywood. What remains is not the myth of a cursed car, but a question cinema never got the chance to answer. What kind of actor would James Dean have become had his journey been allowed to continue for a few more decades? Clifton Webb proved that Hollywood sometimes takes a long time to recognize a star standing right in front of it. By the time Laura introduced him to broad film audiences in 1944, Webb was in his 50s, with decades of stage experience. He did not fit the conventional Hollywood leading man mold: slender frame, crisp diction, fastidious demeanor, and an ability to turn a polite line into razor-sharp sarcasm. That very distinctiveness ultimately became his signature. Laura opened a new chapter, followed by The Razor's Edge, Sitting Pretty, and a series of roles crafted around Webb's unique sophistication. He earned 3 Academy Award nominations and became a rare Hollywood case, an actor reaching the peak of his film career at an age when many stars were being sidelined by major studios. But this is another case that must be recounted accurately. There is no credible evidence that Clifton Webb died from a movie set accident or any unusual event. Following years of declining health and surgery for an intestinal obstruction in 1966, Webb passed away at his Beverly Hills home on October 13th of that year. His physician determined the cause to be cardiac arrest. He was 76 years old. Thus, what stands out about Clifton Webb is not a sensationalized accident, but a career trajectory that defied Hollywood norms. He did not achieve stardom in youth and then cling to fame. Webb waited decades for cinema to find the right place for him, and when the opportunity came, he turned the exact traits that once set him apart into the reason audiences could never mistake him for anyone else. Before the cinematic West had John Wayne, Gary Cooper, or sprawling color vistas, there was Tom Mix riding across the silent screen. He appeared in nearly 300 films and became one of the first cowboy stars to help shape how Hollywood envisioned the West. The oversized hat, the loyal horse, high-speed horseback stunts, and a hero who always seemed in control. Mix understood the power of image well. Many of his film adventures relied on genuine horsemanship and action sequences performed in an era lacking today's technical safety nets. He lived long enough to witness the genre he helped popularize evolve into one of American cinema's most defining styles. Then came October 12, 1940, with no cameras around. Mix was driving his Cord along an Arizona highway near Florence. According to incident reports, his car lost control at a detour, veered off the road, and overturned into a dry wash. Mix, then 60 years old, did not survive the single-vehicle accident. The contrast is almost impossible to ignore. A man who spent much of his screen persona overcoming chases, galloping horses, and situations engineered to look dangerous, ultimately met his end during a real-life trip. Yet Tom Mix should not be remembered solely by that stretch of road in Arizona. Millions of viewers once looked to him to picture what a movie cowboy ought to look like. Many more famous Western stars followed, but part of the visual language they inherited was laid down by Tom Mix, back when movies could not even talk. If Errol Flynn charged into an adventure, chances were Alan Hale was somewhere nearby, laughing heartily, fighting, rowing, or playing the sidekick. Audiences instantly trusted. Hale didn't need to stand dead center on the poster. For decades, he turned supporting roles into a distinct craft of their own, appearing alongside giants like Flynn, James Cagney, Clark Gable, and Humphrey Bogart. One signature role followed Hale for nearly 3 decades, Little John. He played the character in Robin Hood in 1922, returned as Little John in The Adventures of Robin Hood in 1938, and essayed the figure once more in Rogues of Sherwood Forest, released in 1950. Few actors have had the opportunity to revisit the same character across such dramatic transformations in cinema, from silent films to Hollywood's fully realized talkie era. His swashbuckling roles frequently placed Hale amidst swords, horses, and action sets. However, one should not infer from this that a film set accident ended his life. Biographical records note that Alan Hale Sr. passed away on January 22, 1950, at the age of 57, following liver ailment complicated by a viral infection. This was a medical health issue, not an accident. Perhaps Hale's most fitting legacy lies in a simpler detail. For nearly 4 decades, audiences might not have bought tickets solely for his name, but whenever he appeared, an adventure film instantly gained extra vitality. Hollywood was built not only by stars at the center of the frame, but also by actors like Alan Hale, those who made the world around the star believable. Before sitting behind the camera and directing entire film crews, A. Edward Sutherland was the guy taking falls to make audiences laugh. He began in cinema during the silent era, appearing with the Keystone Cops and featuring in Tilly's Punctured Romance in 1914. Those early years in front of the lens gave Sutherland a unique foundation. He understood comedic timing not just through a director's theory, but through the first-hand experience of an actor who had to create it with physical movement and precise timing. By the mid-1920s, he shifted his focus to directing. 1926's Behind the Front helped establish Sutherland's reputation in comedy, and his subsequent career led him to work with numerous famous performers. In 1940, he directed One Night in the Tropics, the film that marked Abbott and Costello's feature film debut. Over more than 3 decades behind the camera, Sutherland helmed over 50 movies across various genres. His story is thus significantly different from many figures on this list. No reliable sources I found confirm that A. Edward Sutherland died from a production accident, a fire, a fall, or an occupational mishap. He lived to be 78 and passed away in Palm Springs, California on December 31, 1973. Standard biographical records do not cite an accidental cause of death. What makes Sutherland memorable lies elsewhere. He entered Hollywood, when cinema was still learning how to tell stories without words, then stayed long enough to work in an industry completely transformed by sound, star power, and technology. Actors in front of the camera often receive most of the spotlight, but figures like Sutherland are the vital links that bridge one cinematic era to the next. Do you think directors like A. Edward Sutherland are being forgotten by film history too quickly? Share your thoughts in the comments section. If you want to keep exploring lesser-known names who helped build classic Hollywood like this video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. The next story will take us to another face and a completely different chapter of Hollywood. A 1944 accident took Harold Russell's hands, but inadvertently brought him to a place he never expected, the Hollywood screen. At the time, Russell was an Army sergeant instructing demolitions at Camp Mackle, North Carolina. During a training session on June 6, a defective detonator caused a block of TNT to explode prematurely. Following medical treatment, he adapted to using 2-hook prostheses and began relearning daily tasks in a completely new way. The military subsequently featured Russell in the short documentary film Diary of a Sergeant, which chronicled a veteran's rehabilitation. Director William Wyler saw the film and realized Russell could bring something that conventional acting could rarely replicate. He was cast in The Best Years of Our Lives as Homer Parrish, a serviceman returning from the war who must adjust to life after losing both hands. Oscar night in 1947 created an unprecedented moment. Russell received an honorary award for bringing hope to disabled veterans through his performance, and then went on to win Best Supporting Actor. He became the only person in Academy Award history to win 2 Oscars for the same performance. Russell didn't transition into a conventional movie star. Most of his later life was dedicated to advocating for disabled individuals and veterans. He passed away in 2002 at age 88 from a heart attack, not from a tragic accident late in life as is sometimes retold. What stands out most about Harold Russell's story is not what he lost. It is how an event that seemed to close off his future ultimately led him to a role that helped millions view disability through a different lens. By age 43, Natalie Wood had lived almost her entire life in front of the camera. From the little girl in Miracle on 34th Street, she transitioned into the teen star of Rebel Without a Cause, then matured through West Side Story, Splendor in the Grass, and Love with the Proper Stranger. 3 Oscar nominations before age 26 showed that Wood was not just a famous Hollywood face, but an actor who navigated the hardest challenge for child stars growing up in full view of the public while maintaining a thriving career. On November 28, 1981, Wood was off Santa Catalina Island aboard the yacht Splendor with her husband Robert Wagner, actor Christopher Walken, and Captain Dennis Davern. By the next morning, she was found in the water near the island. Natalie Wood died at age 43 while still filming Brainstorm, but this is a story that needs to be told with a clear gap. No one has conclusively determined how Wood entered the water. Initially, the case was ruled an accidental drowning. After the investigation was reopened in 2011, her death certificate was amended in 2012 to drowning and other undetermined factors, reflecting that the circumstances leading to the incident remained unestablished. According to later official statements, investigative leads had been exhausted and the case remains formally unsolved. For decades, questions surrounding her final night often overshadowed Natalie Wood's career. But before becoming the center of a Hollywood mystery, she spent over 3 decades creating roles across generations. Perhaps that is the part of the story that deserves to be placed back at center stage. Some actors become famous by constantly changing. Jack Nance did almost the opposite. He made his unusual appearance, distinct voice, and singular acting cadence something director David Lynch could utilize in a myriad of ways. Nance became widely known to independent film audiences as Henry Spencer in Eraserhead. He went on to appear in numerous Lynch projects, including Dune, Blue Velvet, and Wild at Heart.
Lucy, this is Pete Martell.
On television, his role as Pete Martell in Twin Peaks brought Nance's face to a larger audience, particularly through the opening moments of one of the series' most famous mysteries. In late December 1996, his life changed in a matter of hours. According to the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, as cited by the Los Angeles Times, Nance got into a physical altercation with 2 individuals outside a donut shop and suffered a head injury. The following day, a friend checked on him and found him deceased in his South Pasadena home. Nance was 53.
Sorry,
Subsequent retellings of the event often varied in detail, so the most factual summary rests on what authorities confirmed he suffered blunt force head trauma following an altercation before being found unresponsive. No additional theories are needed to make the story tragic. What Jack Nance left behind represents a rare kind of success. He was never a star by standard Hollywood formulas, but within seconds of appearing, David Lynch's audience recognized him instantly. For a character actor, that unmistakable presence is often more precious than top billing on a poster. Audiences watching Shane in 1953 likely remember young Joey's cries to the departing cowboy for a long time. The actor behind that moment, Brandon DeWild, was around 11 years old. The role earned him a Best Supporting Actor Oscar nomination and placed DeWild among the most prominent young actors in Hollywood at the time. What is remarkable, however, is that he didn't remain trapped in the child star mold. As he grew up, DeWild continued performing on stage, television, and film.
Off on my neighbors. Wouldn't even know what they was getting.
You don't know. I'll ship them out of state, unload them up north before the news gets out.
And take a chance on...
In 1963, he starred alongside Paul Newman and Patricia Neal in HUD, proving that a famous child actor of the previous decade could transition into mature adult characters with entirely new depth. By the summer of 1972, he was performing in Butterflies Are Free at the Elitch Theater in Colorado. On July 6, just days after his final performance at the theater, DeWild was driving through Lakewood in rainy conditions. According to historic Elitch Theater records, he was en route to visit his wife in the hospital when he lost control of his van and crashed. DeWild was rushed to the hospital but succumbed to his injuries. He was only 30 years old. Brandon DeWild's story differed from many child stars. His career did not vanish when childhood ended. He successfully navigated that difficult transition phase and was working steadily when the accident occurred. Therefore, if Shane is where most audiences first remember Brandon DeWild, it shouldn't be where his story ends. Behind young Joey was an actor who spent over 2 decades proving he could grow alongside his profession. There were no film sets, no action scenes, and no dozens of crew members standing nearby. William Holden's final chapter unfolded in the quiet confines of his Santa Monica apartment, a stark contrast to the life of a man who had appeared in major works such as Sunset Boulevard, Stalag 17, The Bridge on the River Kwai, and Network. With Stalag 17, Holden won the Best Actor Oscar in 1954, solidifying his position among Hollywood's biggest post-war stars. In November 1981, at the age of 63, Holden had an accident at home. A subsequent autopsy determined he had fallen, hitting his head on an object in the room and sustaining a serious blood loss. He lived alone, so no one immediately discovered the incident. Holden's body was only found several days later when the building manager came to inspect. The forensic findings later concluded it was an accident rather than a case involving another person. There is a sad paradox in that story. Holden had filmed in simulated battlefields, challenging terrain, and large-scale settings, but ultimately a very ordinary incident became an insurmountable problem when he was alone. However, the final few days shouldn't represent more than 4 decades of his career. William Holden went from classic leading roles to complex and multifaceted characters in Sunset Boulevard and Network. These roles showed that a star could grow with cinema rather than relying solely on his youthful image. It is this legacy that allows Holden's name to endure after such an unexpected end. Richard Conte has a face that makes audiences easily believe he knows more than his characters reveal. It is this quality that makes him a distinctive figure in film noir, where secrets, loyalty, and suspicion are often just as important as the action. From Cry of the City and House of Strangers to The Big Combo, Conte built a career playing characters who could stand on either side of the law. Years later, another generation of viewers recognized him in The Godfather as Emilio Barzini. His path to Hollywood didn't begin in the usual way either. Born Nicholas Peter Conti in New Jersey, he worked various jobs before studying acting and entering the stage. By the 1940s, cinema found in Conti a less ostentatious kind of masculinity, calm, cool, and perfectly suited to the crime stories that were becoming the hallmark of the era. But here's a crucial point to correct from accounts linking him to an accident. Richard Conti did not die in a collision or on-set accident. In early April 1975, he suffered a severe heart attack and health complications and was treated at UCLA Medical Center. Conti died on April 15, 1975, at the age of 65. His strength lay in his ability to make supporting characters or villains feel as if they had existed long before the camera started rolling. In a genre that relies heavily on atmosphere, Richard Conti often only needed to step into the frame to change that atmosphere. Hollywood had Jean Harlow for only about 9 years. That time was so short, it is hard to believe when looking at the impact she left behind. First drawing widespread attention with Hell's Angels, Harlow quickly became one of the major icons of the early 1930s. Her platinum blonde hair created an instantly recognizable image, but it was her comedic talent and natural presence before the camera that allowed her to transcend the limits of a simple promotional figure. After arriving at MGM, films like Red Dust Dinner at 8 and Libeled Lady placed Harlow alongside the studio's top stars. In 1937, while filming Saratoga with Clark Gable, Harlow's health noticeably declined. Her condition did not stem from a movie set accident, as some sensationalized accounts often imply. Historical records confirm she suffered from severe kidney failure. Harlow was hospitalized and passed away on June 7, 1937, at just 26 years old. Medical science at the time lacked the effective treatment methods for kidney failure that exist today. Remarkably, Saratoga was completed using alternative production solutions and became one of Harlow's largest commercial successes. A career lasting less than a decade is usually only enough for an actor to begin building a reputation. For Jean Harlow, it was enough to create an icon that Hollywood continued to reference for generations to come. Her story, therefore, needs no fabricated accidents. The speed with which a 26-year-old artist transformed the image of the female screen star was extraordinary in itself. In Shane Allen Ladd did not need to speak much to command the viewer's attention. His character entered the valley as a stranger, keeping most of his past to himself and conveying weight through silence. That style was closely aligned with what built Ladd's career. Instead of grand gestures, he relied on a deep voice, composure, and the sense that the character was always withholding part of his thoughts. Before Shane, film noir classics like This Gun for Hire, The Glass Key, and The Blue Dahlia had established him as one of the standout figures of the 1940s. Ladd's life had included at least one severe incident prior to his final years. In 1962, he was injured by a gunshot at his home. Ladd told police he heard a noise, retrieved a gun to investigate, and accidentally suffered a mishap while moving around. Investigators at the time accepted the explanation that it was an accident. He recovered and returned to work. 2 years later, the end came in a different way. On January 29, 1964, Ladd was found unresponsive at his home in Palm Springs.
I think you're crazy. Glad you did that, kid. Now I don't need an excuse.
The official finding determined that the combination of alcohol and sedatives caused a fatal reaction, and the case was classified as accidental. He was only 50 years old. The movie The Carpetbaggers was released posthumously and became a commercial success. But for many viewers, the most enduring image of Allen Ladd remains the man riding away on horseback in Shane. It was a cinematic ending full of quietude, fitting for an actor who built his entire career on the power of what left unsaid. Some actors are remembered for famous lines, while Alan Ladd is remembered for his silence. If you have ever seen Shane or another of his films, tell us about the moment that made the strongest impression on you in the comments section. Like this video if you want classic Hollywood stories like this to keep being told. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next figure. Because behind a face that seems so familiar, there is sometimes an entire chapter of life that the screen never showed us. The Pacific Ocean once gave Steve Cochran a sense of freedom that Hollywood could hardly offer him. After years of playing tough guys, gangsters, and dark characters, the actor of White Heat, The Damned Don't Cry, and Tomorrow is Another Day often sought out sea voyages. In White Heat, his role as Big Ed Summers alongside James Cagney became one of his most remembered performances. In June 1965, Cochran was aboard the yacht Rogue, sailing south from Mexico with 3 companions. During the journey, the vessel encountered bad weather and a damaged mast. Soon after, Cochran fell ill. His condition progressed rapidly while the ship remained far from medical assistance. On June 15, he passed away at just 48 years old. The crucial point is that this was not a maritime accident directly causing his death. Autopsy findings reported in the press at the time attributed the cause to acute pulmonary edema or a lung infection. After Cochran was no longer able to pilot the boat, his companions lacked sufficient nautical experience to bring the ship to shore themselves. The Rogue drifted for several days before being spotted near the coast of Guatemala. Those unusual circumstances often overshadowed Cochran's career afterward. But before that final voyage, he spent over 2 decades turning seemingly familiar supporting roles into unpredictable, impactful characters. The sea became where his final chapter closed. Cinema is where Steve Cochran left his most lasting mark. Some Hollywood faces seem tailor-made for black and white film, and Gene Tierney was one of them. In Laura, her serene grace almost became part of the mystery the entire film pursued. Just a year later, Leave Her to Heaven showed Tierney could go far beyond the glamour promoted by studios, earning her a Best Actress Oscar nomination. The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, The Razor's Edge, and many other works continued to place her among 20th Century Fox's leading ladies.
What did you do when you went to town?
Oh, we just shopped around for the baby things. Well, we walked to town and back.
Rather a long walk, isn't it?
It is worth noting that Tierney's life cannot be reduced to a Hollywood accident story. Accounts of a severe horse-riding fall lack sufficient evidence to be considered a life-defining crisis or the cause of her death. Tierney's career experienced multiple hiatuses before she returned for several film and television projects before gradually stepping away from acting. Her final film was The Pleasure Seekers in 1964, though Tierney appeared on television afterward and had her final role in the 1980 miniseries Scruples. In 1979, she published her autobiography, Self-Portrait, looking back at a famous but far from simple life behind her perfect screen image. Gene Tierney passed away in Houston on November 6, 1991, at age 70 from emphysema. This was a medical condition, not the aftermath of a film set accident. Perhaps for this reason, Tierney's story is most compelling when told as it was a star praised by Hollywood for her beauty, but ultimately preserved in film history by roles proving she had far more than just beauty. Buster Keaton constructed laughter through an almost paradoxical principle. The more chaotic it got, the calmer his face remained. A train rushing forward, a house collapsing, or the whole world seemingly crumbling around the character, Keaton kept a nearly impassive expression. That is why the nickname Great Stone Face became an inseparable part of his persona, especially through works like The General, Sherlock Jr., and Steamboat Bill Jr. But accuracy on screen sometimes came at the cost of real danger. While making Sherlock Jr. in 1924, Keaton grabbed onto a waterspout over a train car. When a powerful rush of water unexpectedly swept him down, he crashed onto the rail tracks and continued working after the incident. Unbelievably, it was not until about 11 years later that an X-ray revealed he had fractured a neck vertebra. An even more famous image appeared in Steamboat Bill Jr. The entire facade of a house collapsed, while Keaton stood precisely where an open window was letting the structure fall around him. The shot relied on extremely precise calculations and became an icon of how Keaton combined technique with physical comedy. Despite experiencing multiple professional mishaps, Buster Keaton did not die from a stunt. He passed away on February 1st, 1966, at age 70 from lung cancer. What is astonishing is not that he was fearless, but that he understood geometry, timing, and motion deeply enough to translate danger into cinematic language. A century later, viewers can still see precisely where the camera stood, yet it remains hard to believe that Keaton actually stood right there. Harold Lloyd's most famous image shows him dangling from the hands of a clock high above the street in Safety Last. But there is a detail that most audiences at the time could not notice when making the film. Lloyd's right hand was fitted with a prosthesis crafted cleverly enough to virtually disappear on camera. The story began in 1919, before Safety Last made him an icon. During a publicity photo shoot, Lloyd held what he thought was a prop bomb. It was actually live and explosive. The incident cost him his right thumb and index finger, while requiring a lengthy recovery for his eyesight. Doctors initially doubted his ability to continue acting as before. Lloyd chose an entirely different path. A prosthetic glove was designed to replicate his hand on film, and he adjusted his physical performance before the camera. The following years were not a period of withdrawing from stunt-heavy roles. On the contrary, they produced Safety Last, Girl Shy the Freshman, and numerous films establishing Lloyd among silent comedy's big three, alongside Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton. Harold Lloyd lived for more than half a century after the explosion. He passed away in Beverly Hills on March 8, 1971, at age 77, from prostate cancer, not from the effects of the 1919 accident. Thus, the clock in Safety Last carries a different meaning when knowing the whole story. Viewers see a man trying to keep himself from falling. Behind that scene was an artist who truly had to learn how to hold on to his career after an accident that seemed capable of taking it away. On November 15, 1958, the set of Solomon and Sheba near Madrid was filming a dueling scene. Tyrone Power, then 44, was fencing opposite George Sanders. Swordsmanship was nothing new to him. Nearly 2 decades earlier, the Mark of Zorro helped turn Power into one of Hollywood's premier adventure stars. But after completing that day's combat sequence, he suddenly suffered a severe medical emergency. It was a unique juncture in Power's career. He had evolved past the romantic hero persona, starring in swashbucklers like Blood and Sand, and The Black Swan, served in the United States Marine Corps during World War II, and returned to perform more mature roles. Witness for the Prosecution, in 1957, his final completed film presented audiences with a Power distinct from the swashbucklers that built his fame. In Spain, Power was rushed for emergency care after collapsing on set, but he did not survive. Contemporary reports identified the cause as a heart attack. Later biographical accounts cited a diagnosis of fulminant angina pectoris. This was not a fencing accident, even though it happened right after a physically demanding scene. That distinction is crucial. Tyrone Power did not need a fabricated accident to make his final chapter memorable. An actor who built a hero image with swords, horses, and adventures worked up until the very last day of his career. And perhaps that explains why Power's name still carries a sense of motion. He rarely appeared as a star who stood still merely to be looked at. He always seemed to be en route to the next scene. Gig Young spent years trying to escape the familiar image of a suave, charming man who always knew how to lighten the mood. He appeared regularly in films starting in the 1940s, earning 2 Oscar nominations, but it wasn't until They Shoot Horses, Don't They? That audiences saw an entirely different side. The role of Rocky, the master of ceremonies for a grueling dance marathon in the 1969 film, earned Young the Best Supporting Actor Oscar and marked the greatest milestone of his career. That victory did not usher in the stable phase many expected. Entering the 1970s, notable roles dwindled, and Young's personal life underwent continuous shifts. In September 1978, he married Kim Schmidt. Just a few weeks into the marriage, a tragic event occurred at their Manhattan apartment on October 19. Police subsequently determined that Young caused Schmidt's death before taking his own life. He was 64 years old. That incident marked a starkly different chapter from the suave persona audiences were accustomed to seeing on screen.
And for what reasons? This one had a low hairline. Even turned him down.
Rock Hudson?
He said you'd have to...
Nevertheless, Gig Young's entire career cannot be reduced to his final hours. For decades, he proved an ability to turn a polished exterior into a tool for concealing complex character layers. They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Remains the clearest demonstration of that talent, a role that did not rely on familiar charm, but forced Young into the darker territories of a character ultimately winning him his profession's highest honor. Before Hollywood grew accustomed to rebellious, restless lead actors who seemed to carry an internal battle, John Garfield appeared with that exact energy. He did not talk like a gentleman trained for the screen. His rapid delivery, intense gaze, and somewhat gritty movement made Garfield look like someone who walked straight off the streets of New York, rather than a product polished by a studio. Four Daughters brought him his first Oscar nomination shortly after arriving in Hollywood. Following that, The Postman Always Rings Twice, Body and Soul, and Force of Evil allowed Garfield to carve out his own image. Conflicted, sometimes hot-tempered, sometimes vulnerable men, but rarely simple ones. That acting style was later cited as a crucial transition before realistic acting styles gained broader traction in American cinema. His career was at its peak when the political climate of the early 1950s altered everything. Garfield was subpoenaed to testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee in 1951. He denied being a Communist Party member but refused to name others. Afterward, his ability to continue making films narrowed significantly. On May 21, 1952, Garfield died in New York following a heart attack at just 39 years old. He had a pre-existing history of heart disease. 14 years in cinema was not a long time, but it was enough for Garfield to redefine how a leading man could present on screen. Generations that followed continued to push that style further, and its early traces remain visible in the roles John Garfield left behind. While screen cowboys were busy chasing villains, Smiley Burnette usually appeared with a completely different mission, making the adventure more fun. Born Lester Alvin Burnette, music came to Burnette early on, and his ability to play multiple instruments helped him forge his own path during the heyday of musical westerns. When Gene Autry became one of the genre's biggest stars, Burnette frequently appeared alongside him as the comedic sidekick, bringing songs, jokes, and an energy completely opposite the hero's solemn demeanor. Burnett understood well how to make a supporting role indispensable. He did not try to steal the center of the story. Instead, he provided breathing room between action beats and added warmth to the cinematic West. That talent carried him through dozens of films, radio shows, and later television. When musical westerns lost their prominence, Burnett found new audiences. His role as Charlie Pratt in Petticoat Junction brought him back to the small screen and became the final major job of his career. Burnett's health declined during his time on the series. On February 16, 1967, he passed away at age 55 from leukemia. Smiley Burnett was not the fastest gun, the best rider, or the biggest name on the poster. But for many fans of classic westerns, hearing his music and seeing his familiar smile was enough to know that the story was about to get a little lighter. A Martha Raye performance did not always begin behind a velvet curtain. Sometimes before her stood a makeshift stage, simple seats, and an audience in military uniform. Before that image became familiar, Raye was already a high-energy entertainer on the American stage. She rose from vaudeville to Broadway, film, and television, distinguished by a powerful voice, versatile comedic skill, and an uninhibited performance style. The nickname, the Big Mouth, stuck with her for years, but behind that cheerful persona was a career with a far less conventional path than many Hollywood stars. Starting in 1942, Raye began performing on tours for U.S. military personnel. When World War II ended, she kept traveling. The Korean War and later the Vietnam War saw Martha Raye appear in military zones. Her special bond with the Special Forces community led many soldiers to remember her as a familiar face, not just for her entertainment talent, but for her persistent visits over the years. Toward the end of her life, Raye's health declined significantly. A severe stroke in 1990 presented her with numerous physical challenges. On October 19, 1994, she passed away in Los Angeles at age 78 from pneumonia. Hollywood gave Martha Raye a massive stage, but she spent a significant part of her life stepping away from it. The enduring image is not just the artist who brought laughter to audiences, but one who repeatedly carried that talent far beyond the spotlight of the entertainment industry. From brightly lit stages to performance spots thousands of miles from Hollywood, Martha Raye left a legacy hard to encapsulate in just the word artist. If you were surprised to learn about this side of her life, type Martha Raye in the comments so we know you followed along this far. Hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications because the names ahead don't just take us back to old Hollywood, they open up stories that many viewers have never heard in full. Platinum Blonde hit theaters in late October 1931, and Robert Williams seemed to have found the exact movie that could launch him to a whole new level. Playing reporter Stu Smith, he stood between Loretta Young and Jean Harlow without being overshadowed by his more famous co-stars. His fast, humorous, and natural dialogue delivery made Williams feel much more modern than the theatrical acting styles still prevalent in early sound films. This was also his first leading film role. The path to that moment had spanned years. Williams had performed in touring troupes, worked on Broadway, and served in the military during World War I before finding his footing in Hollywood. In 1931, he appeared consecutively in Rebound, Devotion, and then Platinum Blonde. The rapid pace led the film industry to view him as a promising new leading man. But just 3 days after Platinum Blonde premiered, Williams passed away at Hollywood Hospital at the age of 37. The cause was recorded as peritonitis after undergoing 2 surgeries for acute appendicitis. There was no automobile accident behind his death, as some later stories falsely attributed to the case. Robert Williams left the screen just as audiences were getting to know him. Platinum Blonde became his final film, while leaving behind one of early 1930s Hollywood's great questions: how far could an actor who just found his ideal breakout role have gone with more time? The first day of 1945 was supposed to be just a hunting trip with family and friends. For Susan Peters, it split her life into two completely different halves. 3 years prior, Peters had achieved her breakthrough with Random Harvest. Her performance in the MGM film earned the young actress a Best Supporting Actress Oscar nomination, while her career was accelerating. Works like Assignment in Brittany, Song of Russia, and Keep Your Powder Dry continued to solidify her place among the young talent the studio held high hopes for. On January 1, 1945, during a duck hunting trip in the mountains near San Diego, a small-caliber rifle accidentally discharged as Peters was retrieving it. The bullet damaged her spinal cord, leaving her paralyzed from the waist down. She was only 23. Peters did not abandon acting after the tragedy. In 1948, she returned to cinema in The Sign of the Ram, then moved to the stage with The Glass Menagerie and The Barretts of Wimpole Street. Productions were adjusted so she could perform in a wheelchair, making her return a rarity in Hollywood at the time. Peters' health steadily declined over the following years. She passed away on October 23, 1952, at just 31 years old, following prolonged medical complications. Susan Peters never got the chance to pursue the career trajectory MGM had envisioned for her. However, the latter part of her career left a different mark. She returned to audiences during an era when the film industry barely knew how to accommodate an actress using a wheelchair. Before Hollywood turned the cowboy into one of America's most famous cinematic icons, Harry Carey was riding horses on screen back when movies could not talk. Born in New York rather than on the frontier, Carey entered film in 1909 and quickly aligned himself with the Western genre. The image of Cheyenne Harry made him one of the silent era's crucial Western stars. He also forged a long-standing professional relationship with director John Ford, who later became one of the genre's most influential figures in history. What was rare was that Carey did not vanish when talkies transformed all of Hollywood. Instead of clinging to his young cowboy persona, he transitioned into older character roles and continued working steadily. His role as the Senate President in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington in 1939 earned Carey a Best Supporting Actor Oscar nomination when he had already entered a completely different phase of his career. Harry Carey passed away on September 21, 1947, at age 69. Accounts regarding the specific cause vary. Some contemporary records cited coronary thrombosis, while sources based on family memoirs and later research mention emphysema along with lung cancer. The consistent consensus is that his passing was related to illness, not an accident while filming. The following year, John Ford dedicated 3 Godfathers to Carey's memory. It was a fitting tribute to someone present from the Western's earliest days who lived long enough to see the genre he helped build become an essential part of Hollywood. Looking at American film magazines around 1916, Harold Lockwood had all the hallmarks of a screen idol: young, handsome, athletic, and frequently appearing in romantic stories for an audience growing increasingly enamored with cinema. Mae Allison was his most frequent co-star. The two appeared together in over 20 films, becoming one of the silent era's beloved screen couples. Audiences often assumed they were romantically involved off-screen, but that famous partnership belonged primarily to the screen. Lockwood worked with various studios, and by the late 1910s was among the widely known male actors of the very young industry. In 1918, a danger completely different from action scenes was spreading across the world. The influenza pandemic affected millions of families, and Hollywood was not spared. Lockwood contracted the flu during the production of Shadows of Suspicion. His illness progressed rapidly, and he passed away in New York on October 19, 1918, at age 31. Some missing scenes in the film were later completed using a double shot from behind. Just a few years prior, Lockwood was one of the faces helping audiences understand what a movie star was in the new era. When he passed away, Hollywood was still forming the star system that generations later took for granted. Harold Lockwood's surviving films today are not as famous as the names of Chaplin or Keaton, but his short career captures a vital moment, the era when cinema was just beginning to turn actors into nationally known idols. On November 29, 1923, Martha Mansfield had just finished her workday filming The Warrens of Virginia in San Antonio, Texas. She was still wearing her multi-layered Civil War costume when she returned to the automobile to rest between takes. Just minutes later, an incident occurred that caused the entire crew to rush over to assist. Mansfield was 24 and had experience in both vaudeville and silent cinema. She had appeared in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde opposite John Barrymore and was continuing to build her career through various roles when she took on Agatha Warren in the new film. Mansfield's costume suddenly caught fire. Witnesses stated a match may have been dropped or tossed into the vehicle, but the person responsible was never definitively identified. Co-star Wilfrid Lytell quickly used his heavy coat to smother the flames on her upper body, while others tried to extinguish the fire. Mansfield was rushed to the hospital shortly after. She did not survive the following day, November 30th. Most of Mansfield's scenes in The Warrens of Virginia were complete, so the film continued production and was released in 1924. No complete copy of the film is known to exist today. Martha Mansfield's accident belongs to an era when film sets used costumes, materials, and fire safety protocols far different from today's standards. Over a century later, those exact production conditions help modern viewers understand the fragile nature of safety in early cinema. Jack Cassidy possessed a distinct ability. He could make a smug character obnoxious yet captivating enough that viewers wanted to keep watching what he would do next. The Broadway stage was where that talent flourished most. For She Loves Me, Cassidy won the Tony Award for Best Featured Actor in a Musical, then seamlessly transitioned between stage and television. His appearances on Columbo were particularly suited to his persona, suave, intelligent, and always possessing a touch of overconfidence. On the night of December 11, 1976, Cassidy returned to his West Hollywood apartment. Early the next morning, a fire broke out while he was inside. Later reports indicated the fire started after a burning cigarette ignited the sofa while Cassidy fell asleep. By the time emergency crews discovered the blaze, the apartment was severely damaged. Cassidy was unable to escape and died at age 49. The event occurred in a single night, but his career had been built over decades. Cassidy had sung, performed comedy, played villains, and crossed genres without losing his signature presence. On stage, he could fill a theater with confidence. On television, just a timely smile was enough to make a character suspicious. Jack Cassidy passed away in a home accident, but his best performances showed an artist who always knew exactly what to do when the lights came on. Without raising his voice, George Sanders could make a line sound like a warning. His deep voice, precise diction, and almost cold composure made him the ideal choice for sophisticated yet unpredictable gentlemen. In Rebecca, the Picture of Dorian Gray, or All About Eve, Sanders rarely had to do much to capture attention. His role as critic Addison DeWitt in All About Eve brought that art to its peak. Sanders turned sarcasm into his character's weapon and won the Best Supporting Actor Oscar at the 1951 ceremony. The success of the film also placed him among Hollywood's most respected character actors at the time. In subsequent years, he continued making films in America and Europe, but life gradually changed. Declining health, financial difficulties, and personal fatigue emerged in his final years. On April 25, 1972, Sanders was found deceased in a hotel near Barcelona, Spain. Biographical records confirm he took his own life, leaving a short note behind. He was 65 years old. That final act was entirely unlike the control Sanders always projected before the camera. But over 40 years of work cannot be replaced by a single day. Just hearing the voice of Shere Khan in The Jungle Book or seeing Addison DeWitt enter a room, audiences can recognize George Sanders instantly. Few actors turned composure into such a powerful trademark. Albert Dekker once sat in the California legislature and then returned to film sets to play scientists, businessmen, police officers, and menacing figures. Those two seemingly unrelated worlds coexisted in a career spanning several decades. After time on stage, Dekker arrived in Hollywood in the late 1930s. Dr. Cyclops brought him one of his most prominent lead roles, while The Killers and Kiss Me Deadly helped make him a familiar face in film noir. He also served one term in the California State Assembly from 1945 to 1947 before refocusing on acting. His role in The Wild Bunch later became one of his final screen appearances. In May 1968, Dekker was found deceased at his Hollywood home. The circumstances at the scene initially generated much speculation, and news articles often focused on unusual details. After review, investigative authorities found no evidence of foul play and concluded the cause was an accidental asphyxiation during a private activity. Dekker was 62 years old. Before his final day, Albert Dekker had spent over 30 years on stage and screen, while also stepping into politics. A good character actor often makes the viewer believe the character existed long before the film started. Dekker had that ability, and that is the part of his career that deserves to be placed above the headlines that once surrounded his passing. Audiences might not recognize Friz Freeling's face, but they almost certainly know the characters he helped bring to the screen. Over decades at Warner Brothers, Freeling worked with Bugs Bunny, Porky Pig, Sylvester, Tweety, Speedy Gonzales, and Yosemite Sam. He was particularly skilled with rhythm, the pause between a step and a fall, the timing of a character turning around, or a few seconds of silence before a joke landed. Those tiny details became the foundation for hundreds of cartoons that generations watch over and over again. He directed more cartoons than any other director at Warner Brothers during that era. When Warner's animation department changed in the early 1960s, Freeling didn't stop. Along with David H. DePatie, he co-founded DePatie Freeling Enterprises. From here emerged the Pink Panther, a character initially tied to the title sequence of a feature film that quickly evolved into an independent animation franchise. The Pink Fink and many other works continued to gain major recognition, adding to the accolades Freeling had accumulated since the Looney Tunes era. On May 26, 1995, Freeling passed away at UCLA Medical Center in his late 80s. Contemporary announcements did not attribute his passing to an accident. Later biographical sources noted he died of natural causes. Friz Freeling spent over 6 decades animating still drawings. Millions of times Sylvester chasing Tweety or Yosemite Sam losing his temper continues to play on screens, a very special kind of presence for a man who almost always stood behind the camera. A person can stand behind the camera their whole life, yet remain present in the memories of millions of viewers. Friz Freeling is one such case. Do you recognize his mark most through Bugs Bunny, Tweety Sylvester, or the Pink Panther? Pick one and leave it in the comments. If you enjoy stories revealing who truly stood behind Hollywood's icons, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. The list isn't over yet, and the final spots will bring us to even more memorable stories. There is a false story that has clung to Marie Prevost far longer than many of her films' rumors that when found in her apartment, her pet dog had severely damaged the actress's remains. Reliable biographical records do not support that sensational version. The truth is less dramatic, but reflects a sad corner of silent-era Hollywood. Prevost, born in Canada as Mary Bickford Dunn, started in Mack Sennett short comedies before moving to lead roles. In the early 1920s, she became a familiar face at Warner Brothers and was chosen by director Ernst Lubitsch for The Marriage Circle 3 Women and Kiss Me Again. Over roughly 2 decades, Prevost appeared in over 100 films, a remarkable body of work even by the fast production standards of that era. As the film industry changed, her standing gradually narrowed. Lead roles gave way to smaller parts, while personal difficulties and alcohol use increasingly affected her life. By 1936, Prevost had virtually lost her former status. In January 1937, she was found deceased in her Los Angeles apartment at age 40. The cause was recorded as acute alcoholism and malnutrition, not a home fall as some later versions claimed. Marie Prevost lived during an era when Hollywood could create a star very quickly and just as quickly shift the spotlight to someone else. Behind the rumors was an actress who appeared in both silent films and the early years of sound cinema, a career deserving memory through film rather than legend. In the spring of 1919, Wallace Reed was en route to film The Valley of the Giants when his train met with an accident. Reed was injured and required treatment, but the film industry at the time operated with a very clear priority: the film had to go on. The actor returned to work while still in pain, and morphine was used to help him endure filming. Prior to that incident, Reed was already one of silent film's major leading men. His handsome looks, musical talent, and athletic persona made him particularly suited for modern hero roles in the 1910s. Audiences nicknamed him Wally, and studios continually cast him in new projects as his fame grew rapidly. The pain medication originally served a medical purpose, but prolonged use led to severe dependency. Reed kept filming a grueling schedule while his health deteriorated. In late 1922, he entered a treatment facility to try to recover. On January 18, 1923, Reed passed away at age 31 during treatment. Records noted influenza and medical complications occurring on a body weakened by long-term drug dependency. Wallace Reed left behind more than just the story of a famous actor lost too soon. His case exposed an early Hollywood where shooting schedules were sometimes placed above an artist's recovery time. The 1919 accident lasted only a moment. The chain of consequences behind it spanned years. Grace Moore had stood on stages many singers could only dream of before Hollywood turned her into a film star. Trained as a soprano, Moore combined opera with the silver screen at a time when those two worlds rarely met. One Night of Love in 1934 brought her an Oscar nomination and helped audiences who had never entered an opera house experience her voice through cinema. In early 1947, Moore maintained an international performance schedule. On January 26th, she boarded a KLM Douglas DC-3 at Kastrup Airport in Copenhagen, continuing towards Stockholm. The flight carried various passengers, including Prince Gustav Adolf of Sweden. Shortly after takeoff, the plane lost control and crashed near the airport. All 22 people on board perished. The investigation determined that the plane's control surface lock system engaged during parking had not been properly disengaged prior to departure. rendering the DC-3 unable to operate normally after liftoff. Moore died at age 48. Unlike many figures on this list, Grace Moore's case was a clearly documented aviation accident, needing no extra rumors to carry weight. A performance ended, a next flight began, and a touring artist's familiar schedule suddenly halted in Copenhagen. But Moore's voice had already traveled far beyond that final flight. Survived by recordings and films, her image remains that of an artist who brought opera closer to general audiences in a way very few Hollywood stars of her era could. Over 25,000 flight hours, decades working among real aircraft, a career built on turning maneuvers others considered too dangerous into manageable camera shots. By 1965, Paul Mantz was not a stunt pilot trying to prove himself. He was one of the most trusted aviation experts in Hollywood. Mantz had participated in air races, supplied aircraft to the film industry, and performed special flight sequences for major productions. When partner Frank Tallman was injured prior to filming The Flight of the Phoenix, Mantz took on the flying duties for the movie, even though he was 61 and thinking about stepping away from the most dangerous assignments. On July 8, 1965, in the desert dunes near the California-Arizona border, Mantz piloted the Phoenix P-1, an experimental aircraft custom-built for the movie's plot. During a low pass for the camera, the plane struck the terrain and its structure failed under the resulting load. Mantz did not survive. Bobby Rose, also aboard, survived with severe injuries. The accident report was filed under LAX 66A0002 by aviation investigators. The flight of the Phoenix was completed. At the end, the crew included a dedication to the pilot who helped create the aerial sequences. Paul Mantz spent nearly his whole life helping Hollywood make audiences believe planes could do extraordinary things. His final shot reminded us that behind cinema's illusions were people who were truly flying. Around 2 a.m. on June 29, 1967, a Buick was traveling along U.S. Route 90 in Louisiana. Jane Mansfield had just wrapped up a performance schedule in Biloxi, Mississippi, and was en route to New Orleans for a television appearance the following day. Her 3 young children were sleeping in the back seat. There was no film crew present. This was simply a trip between 2 work commitments. Mansfield was 34 at the time and had become one of 1950s Hollywood's most recognizable icons. Her platinum blonde hair, bold promotional style, and roles like The Girl Can't Help It or Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter created a massive public image. But behind that image was an artist who worked continuously across film, stage, television, and live performances. On a dark stretch of road near New Orleans, a truck ahead slowed down as it approached an insect-fogging vehicle, creating a thick haze. The Buick failed to avoid it and crashed into the rear of the truck. Mansfield driver Ronald Harrison and Sam Brody did not survive. The 3 children in the back, Mickey Jr., Zoltan, and Mariska, all survived. The crash brought significant attention to the danger of passenger cars sliding under the rear of large tractor-trailers. Rear underride guards subsequently became an important focus of safety discussions and regulations in the U.S., to the extent that this equipment is often informally called a Mansfield bar. Jane Mansfield spent much of her career making the public look at her. 6 decades later, her name remains linked to another story: how a highway accident contributed to reconsidering the safety design of trucks sharing the same road. On the night of July 23, 1982, a war scene was being filmed at Indian Dunes, California. Lighting, pyrotechnic effects, and a low-flying helicopter were coordinated to create a few dramatic minutes for Twilight Zone the movie. Standing below was Vic Morrow, a 53-year-old actor who had spent over 2 decades building a tough guy persona across film and television. For many American viewers, he was forever linked to Sergeant Saunders in the series Combat, a role that made him a familiar television face of the 1960s. That night's scene called for Morrow to move through water with 2 child actors, Micah Din Lei and Renee Shin Yi Chen, while the helicopter operated above. As special effects were triggered, the helicopter lost control and crashed onto the area where the 3 actors were performing. Morrow and the 2 children perished. 6 people aboard the helicopter survived. The tragedy immediately extended beyond the scope of a single movie. Investigations, lawsuits, and trials spanning years placed Hollywood's execution of dangerous scenes under unprecedented scrutiny. The use of child actors, special effects, and aircraft on film sets became issues examined far more rigorously. Vic Morrow had dozens of roles before that night, but the final event of his career left another milestone, reminding the film industry that even a scene lasting just a few seconds on screen must prioritize human safety over visual impact. A blank cartridge without a bullet can still exert tremendous force at close range. In 1984, that fact became one of the most cited safety lessons in American television history. John Eric Hexum was just 26 at the time and only beginning to gain public recognition. After starring in the sci-fi adventure series Voyagers, his striking looks and confident demeanor quickly brought more opportunities. By 1984, Hexum was playing Mac Harper in the series Cover Up, a project that promised to launch him closer to television stardom. On October 12, filming for an episode was delayed. While waiting, Hexum picked up a gun used for the production, loaded with blank ammunition. Playing around with the gun, he put it to his head and pulled the trigger. No real bullet emerged, but the blast wave and force at close proximity caused severe trauma. Hexum was rushed to emergency care and underwent surgery. 6 days later, he was declared brain dead. The incident was ruled an accident. Hexum's family subsequently agreed to donate his organs. His heart, kidneys, corneas, and other tissues were used to help multiple patients awaiting transplants or medical treatment. John Eric Hexum's career never got the chance to fully develop. However, the tragedy on Cover Up is still brought up when discussing a principle that seems simple but should never be taken lightly. Prop items that look familiar on screen must still be treated as equipment capable of real harm. In 1925, when Ben-Hur, A Tale of the Christ, brought Ramon Navarro to the screen in one of the silent era's most ambitious productions, he was near the pinnacle of Hollywood. Born in Mexico as Ramon Gil Samaniego Navarro, became a major MGM leading man and one of the first actors of Latino heritage to achieve genuine stardom in the American film industry. When Rudolph Valentino passed away, MGM promoted Navarro even further as one of its premier romantic figures. The arrival of talkies transformed Hollywood, but Navarro continued acting, though top stardom gradually gave way to smaller roles. By the late 1960s, he lived relatively quietly in Los Angeles after a career spanning over half a century. On October 30th, 1968, brothers Paul and Tom Ferguson went to Navarro's house. According to case files, they believed a large sum of money was hidden in the home. In reality, no such money existed. The encounter turned into a robbery and assault, resulting in Navarro's death at age 69. The 2 involved were later arrested, tried, and convicted. The details of the crime spawned many sensational stories over the decades, but they should not overshadow what came before. Ramon Navarro once held a position very few Mexican actors could achieve in 1920s Hollywood. From Ben-Hur to dozens of other films, he graced the screen since cinema was silent and helped expand where a Hollywood star could originate from. During the World War II years, Carol Landis did not work only before the camera. She also spent extensive time performing for troops embarking on long tours and appearing at bases far from Hollywood. That image differed from how studios usually promoted Landis, a glamorous blonde actress on her way to becoming a prominent face of the 1940s. Born in 1919 as Frances Lillian Mary Ridsta Landis, started with small parts before 1940's 1 Million BC brought her name to a wider audience. Following that was a contract with 20th Century Fox, along with numerous films, performance tours, and USO activities. By her early 20s, she was living a schedule that many artists spend an entire career experiencing. Behind that dense professional schedule, Landis's personal life went through several difficult periods. On July 5, 1948, she was found deceased at her home in California after taking an overdose of sedatives. Investigating authorities at the time concluded she took her own life. Landis was only 29 years old. Her final years are often retold through relationships and speculative headlines, but prior to all of that was an actress who made nearly 50 films in a very short lifespan, while devoting the war years to bringing entertainment to service members far from home. If Carol Landis is remembered only by her last day, most of her story vanishes. These stories should not be remembered solely by how a life ended. What holds greater value is the journey before that, the roles that shaped cinema, the talents that once mesmerized audiences, and the events that forced Hollywood to reflect on protecting the people behind the camera. Each case is a slice of an era when fame could not shield individuals from risk, and many safety standards were still being formed. Ultimately, what remains is not tragedy, but the legacy they built, the films, the cultural marks, and the lessons helping subsequent generations work with greater care and humanity. As the screen fades to black, each name on this list leaves behind a different feeling: regret, surprise, sometimes even admiration, for an era of Hollywood far away but never completely gone. Which story on this list made you look at Hollywood from a completely different perspective? And if you love behind-the-scenes stories of classic Hollywood, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. See you on the next journey.